Hi and welcome to the Journalism Salute. I'm Mark Simon. In each episode, we'll talk to or about an interesting person or organization related to journalism. The intent is to show that journalists are not the enemy of the people. Thank you for listening. Farnoush Amiri is a reporter covering the Ohio State House for the Associated Press as part of the Report for America program. She's one of three guests that we've had from Report for America. Farnoush was born in Iran, is vice president of the South Asian Journalists Association, and is deputy director for the Asian American Journalist Association student program, which is called Voices. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you have worked across the country. Your work has been featured in a lot of notable places. Can you tell us about your path, both to the United States and your path in journalism?
Sure. Don't have too much memory of my path to the US because I was 5 years old. But I think pretty similarly for a lot of folks who came before the 9/11 era, it was, pretty easy to, not easy, but it was a lot easier to immigrate to the US, especially from countries like Iran. So I was really lucky. I had citizenship because my dad was a citizen. Our experience was much more fortunate and privileged than a lot of folks who are coming into the country now. So that was kind of what that looked like. I originally moved to Southern California, more specifically Torrance, Redondo Beach area, for anyone who knows where that is. And then I grew up in Orange County. And as far as my journalism career, I moved to San Francisco for college when I was 19, and that was the only school actually in the state that had a journalism program. None of the UCs had like a journalism major, and so I really wanted to pursue that, and initially wanted to do magazine journalism and entertainment and all of that, and I think. And I graduated and still wanted to do magazine journalism, still wanted to do entertainment. And then the 2016 election happened, and I felt a shift. I think a lot of people, regardless of political party or anything, it's a kind of a before and after type of moment for you. And I think for me, it made me, really pay attention to what kind of journalism is needed, how can I have the most impact? And because of that, I applied to grad school at New York University and for journalism. And through that program, I got really great internships at NBC News, and I got to travel to Puerto Rico. I got to go to DC and, do some stories about gentrification there, and just kind of went from there. And then I got my job at AP more than 2 years ago. So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
How did your upbringing influence your journalistic interests?
I wish I had like a more original story, but I think like many people who come from countries where there is no freedom of the press, it was really important for me to take advantage of this opportunity that I had to, work and live in a country where there are checks and balances, where there is a fourth estate. And I felt, I've seen actively what it's like when there is no press, when government is not held accountable and there's no accountability reporting. And I really wanted to be that in the US. And I think the other thing is I'm very nosy, and it's a very rare job where you get to be paid to be nosy. And I am extremely curious and easily can talk to strangers. I'm not very shy at all. So I think all of those things really helped push me towards this career.
Okay. Now, I went through a number of things that you wrote, and one of the places that you basically started, you mentioned the magazine reporting and the entertainment reporting. You started at the Hollywood Reporter, where I noticed that in particular you specialized in writing summaries of events. I'm curious what you learned from that experience that may have set you up for your future.
Yeah, I really do think similarly to probably folks who have, worked for Page Six in New York or, any sort of fast-paced news environment, I think working a red carpet and working a show and, award shows, I really do think it oddly prepared me for, covering politicians in the same way that, I mean, you don't exactly ask them what you're wearing or about their most recent, divorce, even though actually, some journalists do ask politicians that, and it is relevant. But it really helps you stay on your toes because entertainment journalism is so competitive, and you're on a red carpet with like every single news outlet, and everyone wants to talk to the same person and ask the same question and get the great same soundbite. And a lot of political journalism is exactly like that. And interestingly enough, one of my like big first stories at the Hollywood Reporter was when I was an intern, and I was covering, this was, I believe this was 2016. Yeah, I was covering a human rights campaign of like fundraiser charity event. And Lee Daniels, who's, the director of Empire at the time, and, obviously a well-renowned producer, he spoke about Donald Trump and kind of gave this warning. And this was before anyone took, him as a presidential candidate very seriously, which is part of the reason why, the media in general failed in that way. But no one was really taken seriously. And Lee Daniels came out and really just went in on, what he saw was the danger that Trump posed as a serious candidate. And that was, and I broke, we were the first news outlet to get that out. I was writing it in an email to my editor at the time, and it was, everyone cited our work. So that was, interestingly enough, unwantingly of my own interests, my, politics and entertainment collided in a major way in 2016. So it was hard to ignore that would be a part of this reporting. But then I realized I'm much more fascinated with the political aspect than I am with, entertainers saying political things.
I think it's so fascinating, though, that you were able to take something from that job and make something pretty good of it, and turn out the work that you did there. All right, so let's move to the AP and move to Columbus, Ohio, where you are. In terms of a week's work for you, I'm looking at recent weeks. I saw you covered a bribery scheme by an energy company. You covered a new police chief in Columbus. You covered the state governor awaiting FDA approval of the coronavirus vaccines. Your beat for Report for America is listed as Ohio legislature, especially as relates to abortion, gun control, and the opioid settlements. So that's a lot. Can you walk us through? Can you walk us through what a week is like for you?
So I think most reporters, general assignment, political reporters, if you would have asked them this question in February of 2020, they could have given you, a really nice outline of Mondays. I like to come in and do this. And, I'd love to be able to catch up with a source on Thursdays, but the pandemic and, the election, and then the January 6th riots, and then police brutality protests. I mean, it's just been a collision of events, and it's nonstop. And a lot of those events continuing, the ramifications now. So for me, like you said, that list that you named that was supposed to be my beat was a really nice thought. Very did not get to cover a lot of those things, but or I covered those and 100 in addition to that. So there is no regular week. I like to, one thing that I do like to do that's pretty routine is mix spot news coverage, breaking news coverage with long-term projects, and kind of really staying nimble with those two skills, because it can get, if you're a breaking news reporter for too long, it'll be really hard for you to spend some time with a story. And if you are a enterprise, investigative reporter for too long, it'll be hard to pick back up those breaking news skills. So I try to maintain both of those things, because they give, they serve different purposes. Also, I have to, like, AP is both of those things, and they require that of us. But I think having those skills really keeps me on my toes and helps me in most news situations, whether it's long-term or breaking.
What's your writing process when you're working on a long-term project?
Oh God, I wish I don't have a good one. I was telling someone the other day, like, I tend to over-report like too much, and then I get overwhelmed with the amount of, like, I'm excited, and so I have all these great quotes and this great data and all this stuff, and then like the idea of putting that all together becomes extremely overwhelming. And but one thing that I've strive to do recently is just to start writing immediately, even if it's bad, or even if it's not going to look anywhere near that. That has really helped, because it's just like, I swear, once I get the lead, or like the first 3 paragraphs, like that weight of like, importance of like, I need to start doing this work is lifted, and I can just like write and then fix and edit and write and edit.
And I think that would be a universal thing I certainly know that I go through that. The piece that you highlight most prominently on your personal website is one that you did for NPR for the show Code Switch in 2020. It's titled The Day That Never Happened. It's a vivid description of a Sunday in June 2005 when armed federal agents came to your house, handcuffed your father, searched the home. It's about how that day changed you and your family. Your family stopped speaking Farsi in public. Your brother went by the Americanized name Rob afterwards. You changed your hair. You changed what you had for lunch at school. A total code switch, essentially what that show is largely about. And it's about how you and your family never talked about the incident. And the article had a very powerful ending. What was it like to put this story on paper, and what was the impact of your writing it?
I think just in the first few months of this year, went to back 3 to 4 funerals of, victims of police brutality. And I've sat with mothers that have been grieving. I've covered hurricanes. I've seen people's lives be demolished in front of them. And all of those things I've been able to do because I have this, while I have this empathy and I am respectful of what these people are going through and that they're allowing me into their lives, I'm also, a layer separated from it. This isn't my life. This is my job. My job is to come and report and tell these people's stories and hope that, we all hope that our work has impact. But writing about yourself, and especially about such a, sensitive and emotional and raw topic like, surveillance and whatever happened that day was the most difficult thing I've ever had to write still. And, it took me a year. And honestly, if it wasn't for, the editor at NPR pushing me and really kind of forcing me to come out and be able to write about it really authentically, then I don't know if I could have, because it is a really, really hard thing for me to do, is write about myself. I mean, I hate cover letters. I hate writing bios. Like, I'm extremely uncomfortable with making myself the main character. But that, that forced me to do that and then some. So it was really hard, but extremely cathartic, I think, not only for me, but for my family. It was just a way to have words to describe it.
How was it received?
It was received, overwhelmingly positive. I mean, I think, many people would have been concerned about, first of all, like, in addition to writing about this extremely horrible and sensitive, event in my life, I was a journalist doing this. So there was this additional layer of like, why is she talking about herself? Why is she talking about her experiences? Can she, this conversation that we're having in media now, like, can she cover these things if it happened to her, if she was a victim of this? Like, so I was more afraid, for my career and in my credibility than I was, about whatever repercussions there could potentially be as far as like, law enforcement or any sort of thing like that. So it was just really extremely well received in it. And then the bittersweet part of it is that so many people messaged me saying they've experienced similar things. And that, I think that that's the thing I'm the most proud of, is that we all experience things and we think we're alone in them until we put it out in the world and someone else feels less alone about something I wrote. And I feel like, there's nothing better for a writer than to feel that.
One of the things that I thought of while I was reading it was even the people who haven't necessarily had something like this happen to them, but there is certainly a large number of people who live in fear of something like that happening to them. And I'm sure it had a significant impact on them as well.
Definitely.
So among the other things that you've written about in the past, and I went back and looked at some of your NBC News work, I looked at kind of your whole scope of everything that you've done. You spoke to families dealing with separations by Trump's travel ban, including one whose mother was stuck in Syria and Somalia. An article on how Brad Pitt's Make It Right Foundation has built homes in New Orleans post Katrina, but they've fallen apart. And another piece on how Hurricane Maria exposed gaps for helping people with disabilities in Puerto Rico. Those, at least from my point of view, were some of your highlights. Are there other stories you've done that you're particularly proud of?
At NBC News or just in general?
Anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really proud of. The last year, the work I did at NBC News was great, and it was, I was new, and I was given all this amazing opportunity in this space to explore, and people gave me, the editors and management there gave me a chance when I had, no experience, and I got to do amazing things that I would have not had my career at AP or, been as good of a journalist if I didn't have that. But I think this past year, spending time being an active participant in the communities that you cover is in my opinion priceless. I think my ability to like that dateline on my AP stories isn't just a fun thing we put. It's to show you like we are the source for this information. We are there on the ground when these things happen, whether it's in Columbus, whether it's in Northeast Ohio, whether it's in Cincinnati, whether it's the village of 200 people where the Oath Keepers planned their assault on their alleged assault on the Capitol on January 6th. I think like there is such a value to being on the ground, to talking to people, to spending time with those people. And, that's one of the really cool things about AP is that it's this kind of larger than life news organization, but everything that we do, almost nothing that we do is parachute journalism. Everything that we do is because we have people who have been living in those places and working in those spaces and knowing that community. And I think we're able to have both of those aspects. We're able to be a global news organization, but telling the story of people on the ground wherever it is. So that's like the work I've done in the past year at AP is some of my, proudest work. We did a lot of, there's this huge investigation me and a group of my colleagues put out a few months ago about, how there's the leaders of major countries have been, the spearheads of COVID disinformation and saying that it is a bioweapon and kind of tracking that online activity of how disinformation spreads and how state news media is like the direct catalyst for a lot of that, and what the repercussions are for when folks don't take a virus seriously or think that it is a bioweapon and it's being used against them. So I think a lot of the COVID reporting, a lot of my reporting on, accountability stuff, one of the major stories that happened last year was the federal government released the names of individuals who got PPP loans. And one thing that we, worked for weeks prior to that was finding out who in government, who with access to these people and these things are getting that money. We want to make sure like if we're keeping them accountable. And so the first name that popped up when we did the search, right when it was released, was Governor Mike DeWine's business. He's part owner of a minor league baseball team. So that was, a really cool story that showed the impact of being prepared, of having a team of people, waiting for data to be released and quickly getting out the news. So I would say like every story that I worked on in the past year, I'm equally as proud of.
Okay, I want to shift gears to some of your other work that you've done, and you've done quite a lot. I was very impressed with the number of things that you're involved in. For one, you were a fellow for Voices, which I mentioned earlier. Now you help oversee it. What is Voices, and how does it work?
Yeah, so Voices is a student program, an independent, student program under the Asian American Journalists Association. So it is a summer program. It starts in May and it goes until convention, which this year is in a few weeks at the end of August. And we pick, a group of students. It's a highly competitive program. We pick college students and early career journalists who are maybe in grad school or a year out after graduating. And then we pick a group of mentors. So these are professional journalists, reporters at LA Times, at the AP, New York Times, Washington Post. And this year we, opened it up to make sure we are including geographical diversity. We are including people from local NPR stations. We are including, local journalists to have, to walk the walk. And so, yeah, that's the program. And they put out a project. So they're all working on a project. There's 5 groups and they're going to put out a project in a few weeks. And, the work that, I did as a student there and these students are doing now is like beyond professional work. It's, the work I did in 2019 was exclusive data showing that, interns at the major news organizations in the country predominantly come from Ivy League schools and highly selective schools, and showing how that pipeline is fraught, and how there's why we see a lack of diversity in journalists overall. So these are amazing stories and really talented people, and I'm really excited to now be on the other end of it, overseeing it.
That's cool that you went from fellow to now helping oversee it. Also, the South Asian Journalists Association, one of the most dynamic journalism organizations in the US and Canada, serves as a network for education, inspiration, and training for South Asian journalists in America and those covering South Asia and South Asian diaspora. You aim to upgrade the coverage of South Asia and uplift the standards of journalism. You're on the board of this group. What are the current priorities for the South Asian Journalists Association?
We have a lot. We have a lot of priorities. I mean, I would say in the past 2-3 years have, really revamped our relationship with our members, our outreach, our events that we provide, and pretty much just, reevaluating like what is our role in this, group of. There's a lot of amazing minority journalism groups, AAJA, NABJ, NAHJ, and they're much more well established and have been around much longer than we do and have a lot more resources and money than we do. But we are a group of volunteers who are very actively working to make sure that when, breaking news happens and it involves, an attack against the South Asian group, we have a statement ready to put out to newsrooms saying this is, for example, the attack on the Sikh members of the Sikh community at the FedEx facility in Indiana. We right after that news broke and we saw the names of the victims and their and the racial breakdown, we put out a statement making sure that news organizations, including the ones I work at, know how to properly, talk about these individuals, talk about this community, how to talk about, the turban correctly, how to, how to spell their language properly. So these are all things, these gaps in newsroom guidance that, we didn't have, and we're trying to fill those gaps. And so that's one thing we're really trying. The other thing is mentorship. A lot of what we hear from students and, our younger members is that they want mentorship opportunities with other South Asian journalists. And I, as someone who really, I gained so much from having mentors in journalism, like I know how important it is. And honestly, older journalists and more seasoned and tenured journalists also want to give back. They're in a place in their lives where, they've accomplished a lot and they really want to make sure that when they retire, whenever that is, there isn't, the door isn't closed behind them. There's other people in the pipeline working through. So yeah, those are kind of like the 2 big priorities we have. We have an awards ceremony coming up in October. We have a lot going on.
So I asked this last week of my guest, Adam Rhodes, and I'll ask it of you too, 2 weeks in a row, that I think it's a fair question. Why do you take on leadership roles?
Yeah, so I actually, did not intentionally take on either of the leadership roles that I'm in right now. So with Saja, I joined the board because I wanted to be more involved, but we had our vice president had to step down, for personal reasons, and I was asked if I wanted to be the vice president, and there was a vote, and I was. So none of that was like planned. Same with AJA. I was supposed to be a mentor, and then they asked me to be a co-director, and then one of our directors, stepped down, and then they asked me to be a director. So both of these leadership opportunities are great, but were not things I was seeking, mainly because I think, similarly with, when people ask, like, do you want to go into editing, or do you want to go into, newsroom management roles? I do really love, the work of a reporter, and, kind of doing things behind the scenes. And I'm not much of a person who wants to, I don't know. I just like, I never have thought about myself in a leadership position, but both of these experiences have really put that into perspective. That's something, I'm good at, I think, and I, could pursue potentially in the future as far as journalism opportunities.
It's also possible to do both.
Yeah. It is possible to do both.
And with that,
a player coach type.
Yep. And with that in mind, where do you see your career heading?
That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like we are all in this like weird place where I think we're just kind of trying to survive month by month. We're still in a pandemic. Things aren't looking too great right now after it was looking good for a while. I think I would love to keep working on the types of stories that I've been working, law enforcement, police reform, covering national politics, telling stories from local communities. So kind of following in that line, and just to be able to do the work kind of wherever that may take me.
And what has the Report for America experience been like for you?
It's been great. I mean, I think Report for America is, one of the solutions to this issue that we're facing right now with local news being, decimated across the country. And I think they are a place that it has a really, great idea of following along with, places like ProPublica and other nonprofit, like Texas Tribune, nonprofit news organizations, of thinking about, how philanthropy goes into journalism and how it could, uphold and maintain newsrooms and provide staff and, funding for staff and funding for projects. So I think it's been a great opportunity for me. I mean, this was a way I could stay at the AP and move into a reporter role in another area. So I think it's an amazing, program, and I highly recommend anyone who wants to get into journalism to consider it.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to do it?
I would say it like every other opportunity is exactly what you make it. And, it's an ability to do like real journalism. And I think that's such a rare thing these days. Like so many other jobs require sitting at a desk and writing briefs or, picking up other people's news stories and aggregating. And this is just like an opportunity to get paid to do real journalism and make a difference. And I mean, I don't know what else I could say besides that to sell someone on it.
All right, last question. Pick a journalism organization that you are not affiliated with that you would like to salute.
Yeah, I mean, I am in constant awe of the Washington Post's policing coverage. They're from their database to their accountability reporting. I think there's, I'm very jealous of their coverage and hope to emulate it. I don't think there's anyone else covering policing in America as well as the Washington Post is.
All right. Farnoush, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to listen to other interviews with reporters in the Report for America program, we've talked to Morgan Mullings in Boston and Cassidy Arena in Iowa. Those are linked in the show notes. Farnoush, thank you.
Thank you.
Report for America does wonderful work. It currently has 300 core members in more than 200 newsrooms. Farnoush is one of 17 core members working with the Associated Press. RFA is currently accepting applications from newsrooms that would like to boost their coverage of undercovered issues and communities through September 30th. Report for America will open applications for prospective journalists in December. For more information, go to their website, www.reportforamerica.org. I also wanted to give a shout out to a group that I learned about recently, Mighty Writers. Mighty Writers is a nonprofit organization that offers free writing programs for kids in and around Philadelphia, as well as Camden and Atlantic City, New Jersey. They're coming soon to New York as well. During the pandemic, they've also provided groceries and lunches to families and kids in need. You can learn more about them at mightywriters.org. Thank you for listening to the Journalism Salute. Please let us know what you think of the show. You can find us on Twitter at JournalismPod, and you can email us at journalismsalute@gmail.com.